Hi Tree Stewards, my name is Megan White. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Vaccaro and I'm the Community Restoration Coordinator.
And this is the part of the Tree Steward training where we show you the best procedures and processes for actually planting a tree. As you can see, we have gotten our site already. The steps that you need to make sure that you've done once you're ready to start planting is that you've cleared your site of any dangers and removed any loose gravel or bricks that could be in the way. Make sure that your site has been approved by the property owner and you have a property owner agreement in hand. You've gotten the location approved by Miss Utilities, and you have all the supplies that you need, which can be found on the Tree Steward checklist.
So the first thing you want to do is dig your hole. I've centered our tree in the middle of this tree well that it's going in. And you want to dig a hole that is 3 times as wide as the root ball and twice as deep as the pot. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of draw myself with the tree centered. I'm going to draw myself a little outline of where I want to dig. Okay? And then I'm going to move this tree out of the way. We have a tarp set up over here that we can put our excess soil on so that it makes easy cleanup at the end. A lot of the soil will go back into the hole, but not all of the soil, because obviously we're going to fill that hole up with a new tree. If there are any weeds growing in the area that your tree is going to be planted, you want to make sure you remove those. Don't add them back into the soil as we plant our tree. Okay, so for this part, you want to take your tree out of the pot. You do not want to lift the tree out by the trunk. That will potentially damage your tree. So Megan is going to hold on to the tree. I'm going to tip it on its side, and I'm going to pull the pot off. Okay. Now that we have the tree out of the pot, we just want to make sure that we don't have any roots that are growing in a circle and girdling the tree that will potentially make it have a very short life. So you can use a tool or your hands to rough up these roots. If you need to, you can use pruners to prune the roots to make sure that they're growing outward and not sideways. You also want to look at the bottom of the tree. So now we want to make sure that the bottom of our hole is nice and flat. Where we put our tree in there. And next we're going to check to make sure that we can see the root collar of our tree. So if your tree looks like this and it is just coming like a stick straight up out of the soil, you are not at the root flare yet. You want to make sure that you can see that root flare. So we're going to remove some of this soil until we get to it.
If you're seeing that there are roots that are coming up out of the root system, you want to cut those off so that we can focus all of the growth of the roots out into this soil.
Now that we've uncovered this tree, the surface, to try to find our root flare, we're noticing an issue here, and that is that this tree actually used to have more than 1 leader. Eventually this could rot back and affect the integrity of the trunk of the tree. We do not want that to happen. So if you have tree stock that looks like this, we would advise you not to plant it. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we are going to go ahead and plant this tree in spite of the fact that it has this defect. But we will be taking this tree back up out of the ground and replacing it with a stock that does not have this defect.
That's why it's really important when you're first picking up those trees from the nurseries to give it a quick inspection and make sure there's no defects here. Obviously this one was covered in the soil, so don't be afraid to dig around while you're picking up those trees. The next step is making sure that our tree is even and straight. As you can see right here, it's on a slant. So we're gonna recompact the soil around here to make sure that we're getting it even, just pushing some soil underneath the root balls. And the best way to test to make sure that your tree is now straight is by laying your shovel across and making sure that it's even and that your shovel is in line with the root collar. Once this is done and once it's even, you can start filling in the soil around. Your next step is going to be filling up the hole halfway with the same dirt that you dug out of the hole earlier. So fill that about halfway, and then we're gonna fill it with water to help get out all the air pockets. If you're seeing large pieces of gravel like this, make sure that they're being broken up, or if you're finding rocks, make sure that you're removing them.
It's good to tamp the soil down as you go because you don't want to have any air pockets.
Once you've filled it about halfway, you can do some compacting, make sure you're tamping it out. You're then going to put a 5-gallon bucket of water around the area to help get out any air pockets. And then keep filling it up the rest of the way. Same rules apply as you're filling it the second time. Make sure you're tamping it out, making sure you're removing any large pieces of soil or rock.
At this point, you don't want to use your foot because then you could make the soil a little too compact. You don't want it to be a brick, but using your shovel is just fine. At this point, we're just going to tamp this down with our hands and make sure that everything's nice and firm and the tree isn't going to settle too much and that our surface is nice and even. Remember, if you don't want your tree to be planted too deep, it's okay to be a little bit shallow, not a lot shallow, but it's very important that this root collar is not below the surface of the soil.
The next step is mulching your tree, and a good rule of thumb for this is 1 bag of mulch per tree about this size. The rule is 3 by 3 by 3. You want it to be 3 feet in diameter, 3 inches deep, and 3 inches from the collar. The best way to break open a bag is to grab a shovel, break it open, and disperse.
I want that.
Thank you. Again, you want to make sure that that root collar is not being suffocated. That's why you want that 3-inch barrier. Because we are planting in a tree well, we're going to put another bag in just to make sure that we're covering the full surface area. It never hurts to overmulch too much as long as you're not making it too thick or too deep. As you're mulching, the shape that you want is more donut. You want there to be a hole and a gap right by that root collar. You don't want the mulch coming up to the stem of the tree. So aim for a donut and not a mountain shape. After you have mulched your tree, you're gonna go go ahead and want to re-water it with a 5-gallon bucket, really focusing on that area where you planted your tree. Now, mulch may shift during this process, so it's important to go back through and make sure you're keeping that donut shape and you're not rearranging the mulch into a mountain.
Okay, since our tree is here on the street, we want to be mindful of the shape that it's going to take eventually and whether or not it's going to impede people walking by and cars parked next to it. So I'm going to go ahead and prune off the lower branches on this tree. You want to make sure you're using pruners, not scissors. You can also use a pruning saw if you have one. And you also want to make sure that you're pruning right at the growth collar there. If you prune out like this, then what's going to happen is this piece is either going to grow some weird branches off of it, or it's going to start to rot back and then potentially undermine the integrity of the trunk of the tree. So I'm going to prune, and I'm pruning at an angle. So I'm also at this point going to remove any tags that are attached to the tree. If this tag were to be left on, then as the tree grows and its circumference expands, then this tag could girdle that stem and kill it off.
The next step is going to be staking your tree. You're typically going to use 2 to 3 stakes per tree of this size, and you want to put them on opposite sides of each other. So I'm going to put one right here about 2 feet out and hammer that in so it's not going to be disrupted by wind. After you've hammered in your stakes, you're going to grab your tree ties and your twine. You want to apply or attach the twine and the tree ties to the tree so that the wind doesn't blow it over, but not putting too much pressure or strain on it that you're restricting it towards one way or another. It's really just to stabilize it in the case of wind. So you put your tree tie on the tree, and this is going to protect it so as it grows, it's not getting rubbed on or having anything like that. You're going to put your rope through the holes down here and attach it to the stake. I always recommend doing a few loops around just to make sure it's super sturdy, and then doing a knot or a few knots. As you can see here, there's enough room that the tree is not being pushed to side, but in the event of wind, it's being held up by the stake. You're going to do the same thing to the other side. Typically, you want to put it at a different location so you're having stability along the entire tree. For this one, we're going to put it a little bit closer to the base to make sure we're stable down there. Again, pull it out just enough. Do a few loops around to make sure it's as stable as it can be, and tie it tight. Our next step is to put our watering bag or our gator bag around the tree. You're going to loop it around and use the zipper and secure it around the trunk of the tree. If you flip it to the opposite side, and here you can see this stake is actually a little bit too low, so we may have to restake this to bring it a little bit higher so it doesn't interfere as much with the gator bag. On the back of the gator bag, the opposite side of the zipper, there is a hole right here that will allow you to put a hose in and fill this up with water. We unfortunately cannot demonstrate that for you today because of parking spaces, but we will bring our truck around with our water tank in the back, put our hose in here and fill this with water. And this, especially during hot seasons, will keep the tree watered for about a week to 2 weeks. final step in your tree planting is putting on deer protection. Now this is an optional step depending on where you are planting. Typically if you're planting in a city like we are today, you don't need deer protection. We're still going to demonstrate. If you're doing it in a park, in a field, you definitely want to put deer protection on to help prevent any interference from deer. There's a few different techniques to do this, but the way that we're going to do it is wrap it around our stakes. So gonna roll it out, bring it all the way around our stake, and using our shears, we're gonna cut to size. Thank you. One more. Then using zip ties, you're going to secure it around the tree. Typically you just need 3 or 4, just enough to secure it. Sometimes with deer protection, you're just gonna put it around the root of the trees. Sometimes it'll be more of a metal mesh if there's more concern for deer. There's a few different techniques, but overall this is the easiest one.
Now that you have your tree in the ground, a few tips on how to take care of it. First, you're going to want to make sure that you refresh the mulch once a year. Make sure you maintain about 3 inches of mulch and be sure to keep it away from the trunk of the tree. Once your tree is 1 year old, you're going to want to remove these stakes. You can reattach the deer protection to protect your tree a little bit longer, but the stakes should be taken away, and nothing should impede the growth of the tree. If any of your branches are growing in the wrong direction or impeding passersby, you can then prune those branches off. You're going to want to make sure that your tree gets enough water for the first 2 seasons. So if you're planting in the spring, the good rule of thumb is you want to make sure that that tree is getting about 1 inch of water a week. If you've had 1 inch of rainfall, there's no need to go out and water your tree. If you have not had rain that week or you haven't had enough rain that week, then go out and fill your gator bag or water it in any manner that you are watering your tree. At the end of the growing season, you're going to want to remove your gator bag and store it for the winter. You can put it back on in the spring and continue to water your tree with it. However, at the end of your second growing season, you won't need that gator bag any longer. Your tree should be adapted to the climate and have enough root system to grow on its own without additional watering from you.
Once you have followed all those steps, you have now planted a tree and made us one step closer to a healthier tree canopy on the Eastern Shore. Thank you all so much for becoming tree stewards, and let us know if you have any questions.